What's going on, my friends? I hope you're having a good day and I hope you have a good week. I'm here to weigh in on what's been going on in the last 24 to 48 hours in Israel and Palestine, and I hope this could be one of the most fair, honest, and multi-layered discussions and analysis of the Israel-Palestine situation currently in Israel. I see a lot of stuff, and I've been researching over the past 24 hours to try to give you guys the best breakdown of what everybody's saying, what all of the options and possibilities are, and what's truly going on. So let's wait about a minute or 2 minutes for everybody to get in the live stream. Thank you so much for joining. I'm going to post this thing to the top. Let's see if I can get it. Got it. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at DreamRare, DreamRare. You can follow me on Twitter at Legendary Energy, and my website I will post at the end is legendary.vision. That's the whole website. If you would like to talk or email me or whatever, check out some of my stuff. Thank you guys. I'm going to just drink a coffee for 20 seconds. Terry, Sebastian, thank you guys for joining. Stephen, hello from Israel. God bless. Michael, hello. Francis, how are you guys? Thank you so much for joining. Darren, Nicholas, I appreciate you guys for coming in. Eric, I hear you guys. I'm reading the comments right now, and I want to give you the fairest breakdown of the Israel-Palestine last 24 hours because I do see a lot of fake news out there. I see a lot of bias. I see a lot of misinformation. I see a lot of headline manipulation, as always, and I see a lot of stubbornness. I see a lot of just straight up, fakeness and phoniness from a lot of angles. So, that's what I'm here for. All right, let's get into it. I just want to say, before I start, people always ask me, they say, Anomaly, what news source do you trust? Like, what news source do you read? What do you go to as your go-to news? There's certain people on YouTube that I like and I listen to. I like to listen to people like, the way I speak. That's my preferred form of intaking information. But I do what Dick Gregory does. And there's a Dick Gregory quote. I'm not going to quote it exactly, but Dick Gregory said, I buy a bunch of newspapers. I spend thousands of dollars on newspapers a month. I don't spend money because it's free online. But he said, I look for the cracks in the newspapers. I read them all. I don't trust any. I'm looking for the cracks. So that's what I do. And that's what I did to this Israel-Palestine situation. I let everybody talk. I let everybody tweet. I let all the mainstream media post their stuff. And then I go in and I look for the cracks. I read the headlines, I read some of the stories, and I try to find who's telling the truth and who's not. You can find it through the cracks. I don't specifically trust any news source, but I'm reading through the cracks. Excuse me. So I'm not here to tell you about the history of Israel and Palestine. I wasn't born thousands of years ago. I don't know who originally owned it. I wasn't alive back then. I'm not going to tell you about 70 years ago in Israel and Palestine and, what truly happened there. I wasn't alive. I wasn't there to see it for myself. I'm going to tell you about the last 48 hours in Israel and Palestine and what I noticed about how dishonest a lot of the media is. But that's nothing new. That's why we're here. So the United States under President Trump decided to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. While a lot of people act like this is some sort of crazy move, every single president from George W. Bush to Barack Obama to Bill Clinton said that the capital of Israel was Jerusalem. They said it multiple times. This is not revolutionary. This is not controversial as much as the media wants to make it. What is different about President Trump is the other politicians, the Clintons and the Bushes and the Obamas, they just talked about it. They said, I'm going to move the embassy, and then they never did. President Trump, if you've noticed, he's very blunt, he's very straightforward, but he does something that no other politician does, which is he actually follows through on what he says. Does he say everything that he means all the time? No. Is he perfect? No, I think we've established this at this point, but is he one of the most blunt politicians who actually is trying to do what he says? I would say yes. I mean, every single thing that he's talking about, he's really trying to do, whereas politicians from the past, they just talk about it. They say, oh, I'm going to do this and do that, and then they get the votes, and then they're like a totally different person. With Trump, you get what you see, love it or hate it, you get what you see. So he actually moved the U.S. embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. So Israel is very, very thrilled, and Palestine is not so thrilled, but I don't think they're really ever thrilled, because there's a ongoing eternal conflict in Palestine. And I wouldn't even say it's just the last 5 or 10 years. If you read history books and believe biblical and religious scriptures, it pretty much says that people have been fighting over this religious land since the beginning of time. So this is thousands of years of fighting. It's nothing new. I don't think it's been caused by Israel in the last year or two. I think it's just something that people have been fighting. And also in the Middle East as well. And not only just the Middle East, in the whole world, I think what no one wants to talk about is human civilization has been fighting forever. I mean, you could act like it's something new, but we've been at war forever. And especially in the Middle East, whether U.S. intervention or not, that's what humans have been doing, especially in those regions because of their, religious beliefs and whatnot. There's been thousands of years of eternal fighting. So Israel, or United States, makes the U.S. embassy in Jerusalem, and people celebrate. Ivanka's there. A bunch of people go and celebrate in Israel, and Palestine, decides that they're not so happy, so they kind of pretty much riot. And here's one thing I noticed that I want to say. Like I said, I'm trying to be as fair, as honest, as accurate. I don't want to see people die. I want to see peace, love, and positivity. But there's a lot of phony dishonesty going on. So first of all, one thing I noticed when I read all the newspapers, from the progressive sources to the New York Times to the Washington Post, from the liberals to the conservative, they tried to use the word protesters. And even in their own articles, I have a New York Times article up here, says Israel killed dozens at the Gaza border. They keep using the word protesters, but they also admit in the article that these protesters are throwing Molotov cocktails, they're throwing stones, they're using like masses of people to try to cross the Israeli border. So this is the first thing that I want to say. Regardless, I'm not even going to get into the lives lost. It's horrible. We never want it to happen. But I think it's just intellectually and factually dishonest to call these people protesters if even in your article you're admitting that they're throwing things on fire, they're throwing stones, and they're using dozens of people to try to breach the border. So I find that, as always, I mean, this is what I say all the time, and some people get upset. Most people feel what I'm saying because it's true, is the liberal and progressive, the left-leaning side, they won't say that. They victimize everybody. Everybody has a victim mentality, and no matter what you do, if you stand up for the side of the victim, they'll always go to bat for you in their media, and they'll always support you. And I just think it's not fair for liberal sources like the New York Times or progressive sources like Democracy Now! To call people protesters, because I mean, a protest in at least our terms is usually a peaceful protest, and if people are trying to cross the border, they're beyond protesters. They're now border crossers, or they're, maybe rioters, or I think that would be a little bit more accurate of terms if you want to really accurately portray the situation at hand. But that's the thing that I've noticed over the last year, and that's why I'm even here to begin with, is the liberal and progressive media, they're not very honest, they're not very accurate, and they always go to the bat for the victim mentality. And I do want to say, before I even get further into this, is protesters, yes, peaceful protest is very important. Peaceful protest is necessary in a democracy. I myself have been to several protests. I've protested for clean water. I've protested in the progressive realm many times. I'm very familiar with it, and I'm not knocking protests. But what liberals and progressives need to understand, and conservatives and everybody as well, is that they use protesters not just in Palestine. They use protesters in other countries such as Syria and Libya and Ukraine. They use protesters to have a coup. It's the perfect way to establish a puppet president or a puppet regime, because you can act like the protesters are innocent, you can make them violent, and you can also use protesters to push a political agenda or push, potentially politicians out of the arena. So protesters can be violent, they can be militant, and protesters can also be militarized to establish some sort of government. So we need to at least understand that, because I find that people on the left, all that they do is just glorify protesters no matter what they do. And you saw that here in the United States during the Charlottesville situation. And in my personal perspective, that was the way for the liberal media and for the mainstream media to completely just throw a blanket over any sort of protesters for their own personal agenda, which could possibly be militant. Which is, you know, the Charlottesville situation. You had extremely right-wing people, like super alt-right people out there protesting. And then you had Antifa and other sort of protest groups go there. But what you have to understand is the media tried to make this narrative in the United States. They're doing it in Israel. They do it in Syria. They do it all over the place. It's eventually going to backfire on you, even if you are liberal or progressive. You think you're helping, because President Trump came out and said during the Charlottesville protest, he said, hey, there's bad people on both sides. It's a totally factual argument. Yes, there's bad people on that extremist right-wing situation, but what President Trump was trying to say is the protesters are bad too. A lot of Antifa members are basically domestic terrorists. They throw urine at people, they throw feces at people, they attack people, they threaten people. A lot of them are criminals and they are terrorists. So by using that situation, the media tried to use a smokescreen of protesters can never do wrong. They're just protesters. So they're doing the same thing in Israel. They throw a blanket statement. They do it here. They do it in Ukraine. They do it in Syria. It's their way to establish a coup. It's their way to push a political agenda by putting a blanket statement saying that all protesters, oh no, they're bad, so they can't possibly be bad. How dare Trump say that both sides had bad people on it? And then months later you realize President Trump was exactly right. Yes, there's bad people on the right, but there's extremely bad people on the left. The only difference is, for some reason, the left-wing media is so delusional and so lacks self-awareness that they think that there's no such thing as a bad protester. There's no such thing as a violent protester. This is a trap, folks, and I'm saying this on a bigger scale than just Israel Palestine, because they do this all over the world. They use protests. They radicalize protesters. They use the media to act like they're doing nothing wrong, and then they use that to, inflict their political will. They've done it in Ukraine, they've done it in Syria, they're doing it in Israel Palestine, and they're doing it in the United States. So progressives and liberals, please just pay attention. Yes, it's okay to protest, but protesters are not flawless, perfect human beings. If you break the law or do something you shouldn't do, it's not justified because you're a protester throwing feces at people or throwing Molotov cocktails. It doesn't make it smart. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it noble. It just makes it really, really foolish, and it is going to be used against you. I'm just throwing that out there. So I would say that this is almost, definitely happening regardless of what you think about Israel and Palestine. Even the most liberal and progressive of sources are admitting that these protesters were using violent force, and they were also trying to break the border. So, like I said, I'm trying to be as fair and accurate as possible. I know this is a very touchy subject to people, and I've been reading conservatives, I've been reading liberals, I've been reading progressives. I just don't think that these protesters are just protesters. And a lot of people have been saying, a lot of news sources, and I've even, like I said, this is how I know. People say, anomaly, how do you know what news to trust? I read them all, and I find that once you get past the headlines and once you get past certain angles of it, even the liberal and progressive news sources will admit that the protesters are doing things that they shouldn't do. Democracy Now! Admitted, they're super. Democracy Now! Says, Gaza, how to Israel are a bunch of mass murderers. They're killing a bunch of people in Gaza. Even they admitted that the protesters were breaking through the border and throwing stuff. New York Times says Israel's killing a bunch of Palestinians, but even they admit that they're trying to, breach the border. And I want to say, for peace talks between Israel and Palestine, these little, militarized protests, they're never going, you're not going to take 50 people. Just throwing it out there, if I have any listeners in Gaza or any listeners in Palestine, I know I have a few in Israel, you're never going to overthrow Israel, or you're never going to take the land back from Israel by taking 50 people and running towards the border and running towards Israeli police that are literally saying they're going to shoot anybody who comes past a certain point. I've heard that Israel sent out pamphlets to Palestine. They've literally been like, hey guys, don't come near the border because we're going to shoot and kill everybody who runs past. And then people still do it. And then the media freaks out and says, oh my goodness, I can't believe they've done that. And I hate to say it, but liberal and progressive media, time and time again, they prove to me that they have no regards for accuracy, they have no regards for honesty, they have no regards for common sense, they have no regards for a multi-layered approach to what's going on. The only people I've seen say what I'm saying, yet condemn the killings, is actually someone that is considered conservative or conspiratorial, which is Paul Joseph Watson. He's the only person who said, I don't agree, I don't think Israel should have killed people, but, you know, people need to be a little self-accountable and not throw Molotov's cocktails and try to storm the border. So it's like any sort of like fair, honest approach, I just find from researching everybody, it just always nowadays either comes from people like me, people who are honest, you know, peace-loving people who the left rejects and, you know, right-wing people love, like people like myself or Dave Rubin or like Tim Pool. We're very centrist type people. We tell the truth, but who likes us? I mean, who listens to me? Who listens to Tim Pool? And, you know, who listens to Paul Joseph Watson? It's right-wing people. It's Trump supporters and liberals and progressives, you know, a little bit, but it seems like they just don't like honesty, they don't like accuracy, and they don't like a multifaceted approach. And this is something that I've noticed over and over and over again from the left-wing media. I mean, I've seen on Twitter, they have one of the worst and fakest, you know, featured news sections in the world. They did a story earlier this year that said there was a lesbian trans woman, a lesbian transgender woman, that ran at a police officer on a college campus with a knife. This is straight off Twitter. This is not a conspiracy. This is not me reaching. This is really what happened. Twitter had a featured story about a transgendered lesbian woman who ran at a police officer with a knife. They gave her like 5 minutes. She kept running towards the police officer. They told her multiple times to put the knife down. The lesbian trans woman didn't put the knife down, got shot and killed by police, and the headline on Twitter is, lesbian gay activist is murdered by police officers. And it was literally an assisted suicide. She wanted to die. She purposely did that. She didn't listen to directions. It's very sad. I'm not, you know, I never like when someone's life is taken away. It's horrible. But this is who Twitter is. This is who a lot of the left-wing media is. They don't care about the truth. They don't care about accuracy. They're literally, you can run at a police with a knife, get shot, and they'll act like you're the victim. So Twitter is just not to be trusted. They're never going to tell the truth about the Palestine-Israel situation because they can't even tell the truth about a lesbian trans woman running at a police with a knife. I mean, unless you want to die, don't run at a police officer with a knife. It doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative or progressive or right-wing. I mean, that's just common sense, folks, and there is no common sense in liberal media. They have none. They're trying to make our kids stupid. They're trying to make our kids ignorant and dumb and kill us. I mean, what else? If I wanted someone to die, I would say, hey, here's an idea. Take a knife and run at a police officer. That's how you get someone killed. But Twitter glorifies that person. They call him an activist, a hero, and they condemn the police. People like Sean King. It doesn't matter. If you know, Sean King's a big racial activist on Twitter. It doesn't matter what happens. His mentality is, you know, my people are the victim no matter what happens, and progressives are just like this. I hate to say it, but every progressive I follow, they'll share any sort of cop video. I know the cops are corrupt. I know that cops make mistakes. I know that they need to be held accountable. I'm not somebody who says cops are perfect. Let's protect cops at all costs. I'm not that type of person. I know cops are corrupt. I've dealt with it. But I have a rare ability that progressives don't seem to have, and Sean King and these racial activists definitely don't have. They don't have honesty or common sense like I do. So I have the rare ability to be like, hey, cops are corrupt and cops are bad. Some cops are bad and they make mistakes and they should be held accountable. But it doesn't mean people can just do whatever they want and they're always heroes and victims. And what do progressives do? Like, you know, Sean King and even Jimmy Dore. I love his progressive analysis, but progressives are just so fake when it comes to this situation. They'll share a video of literally a police handcuffing a person, black or white, it doesn't matter. I've seen both. And the person turns around and then the police slams them and they say, oh my goodness, why did the police do that? Well, let's see, Jimmy Dore. Let's see, Sean King. Let's put our thinking caps on for this one, progressives. If you're getting handcuffed and you turn around, you are now considered a threat and you deserve to get body slammed to the ground. That's just basic common sense. I'm not saying all cops are perfect, but all people aren't perfect. All citizens aren't perfect. liberals and progressives and, Sean King type activists disgust me because they apply this type of thinking to everything, and they think that they're these great, heroes of society. Like, oh my goodness, I'm such a great person because I have no common sense and I have the inability to tell the truth about virtually anything that has to do with Israel or Palestine or police or America. And half these people are making a lot of money and touring the country, and that's great. I'm not saying that they're rich or anything, but it's like, is there any gratefulness? Do you ever hear any of them say, oh my God, I'm so happy that I can live my dream and I'm touring and I'm famous and I'm successful and I'm so blessed to be here in America where I'm allowed to say this stuff? They don't do that. They hate America. They hate the world. They hate themselves. They're just hater, negative type people, and they think it makes them some sort of activist hero. It's just not true. So now I explained about America. It was a little tangent, but it's important as well because it's an overall philosophy. I'm not even concerned about the politics of stuff. It's just the truth and common sense that matters above everything. Take what I just said to Israel. The same news sources will tell you the same things on loop. It doesn't matter what happened. If you want to live in that fake world and you want to live in that negative little nasty reality, you could follow people on Twitter and you could just revel in all the bad stuff that they post all the day, but it's just not true, my friends. And I'm not saying that I know the core of what's going on in Israel and Palestine, how long it's been going on, whose land deserves, but what I do know is that if I live in Palestine, regardless of how I feel politically, say I'm a Palestinian and I believe Israel, that's my land, I believe the embassy shouldn't be there, I believe that we need peace talks and we need to be treated better, I'm still not going to run towards the border because I would expect Israel police to kill me, okay? I would never do that, even if I felt 100% that Israel was my land and that everything they were doing is wrong. It's a death wish to throw stones at Israeli police and to throw stones and Molotov cocktails over the border and to shoot stuff off and to run dozens of people running towards the border. It's a death wish, okay? So when people die, yes, it's sad. Yes, I'm sure that there's some sort of other de-escalation thing that they probably maybe could have done to prevent lives, but we are feeding our kids especially, and I don't like to pick sides, but there's just no honesty left on the left anymore. There's just no truth. There's just no integrity. There's just no common sense. It's like they want everyone to die, and then they want to celebrate it like it's some sort of activist thing. And, I don't know enough about Hamas to really weigh in fully, but I do want to say, they're the government and social and military wing of Gaza Strip for Palestine, and there's been many reports that they've shot off, rockets out of hospitals. So then when Israel, retaliates, and I'm not saying Israel's perfect, I know they've made a lot of mistakes just like the United States has in the Middle East. I'm not saying that they're perfect at all, but what I'm saying is just because Israel's not perfect doesn't mean Palestine, oh my God, there's no way that Hamas could do anything wrong, and there's no way that a Palestine citizen can do wrong. They're just perfect angels who've never done anything wrong in their life. I mean, you just have to analyze a situation and be like, maybe that's true. And honestly, it's so easy to dupe the liberal media. That's all you have to do. I mean, there's reports that are saying that Hamas is paying people $1,000 to run towards the border and that they use children as smoke screens, to push a political agenda because they know that the liberal and progressive media is so fake and so naive and always panders to the victim mentality. And I'm not saying I know this for a fact, but it's something to consider. And that's what I always say. I don't care if you agree with me. I don't care what you think. I just want you to know how to think. And if you don't consider, like if you're just like, oh, Israel's terrible, you're never going to get to the truth. You might pat yourself on the back and think you're some sort of hero of the people, but you're just really not, because that's not the way the world works. You have to weigh everything out and really figure out what's going on. And I mean, I know for a fact because I have friends in Syria and I have friends in the Middle East where there are organizations that do exactly that. They use children as human shields. They use human beings as human shields, and they put them in cages and they put them on the front of situations, and they do that stuff. So I'm not saying I know for sure that that's happening in Palestine, but it's not out of the realm. And if you never think about that type of stuff and you don't even consider it, I'm not saying I know the true story of what's going on with the land and stuff, but if I know that the Israel forces are there, you can't just show up and start throwing things at them. I mean, I feel like this is so childish that I even have to say this, but if you follow progressives and you follow like little liberal boys who are like 130 pounds and they write for Vice and Vox, and I'm not hating on people's weight or anything, I'm just being honest. Those are the type, like Paul Joseph Watson says, soy boys, and I'm not, like I said, I'm not hating if you eat soy or you eat any sort of, I don't care about your diet. I hope that you're healthy and I hope that you're happy. It just so happens that like everybody that hates all the time like this, they're literally like 130-pound men who like sit on Twitter, you know, and drink a lot of soy. I'm not making fun of that. That just seems to be a pattern. So, you know, these are the people that are like, Israel's murdering people, you know, oh my God, it's so terrible. They have this victim mentality, and it's like Kanye said, it's like Candace Owens said, you know, I'm not saying that Israel's perfect. I'm not saying that America's perfect. I'm not saying that there isn't things that could de-escalate it. But if you always just pander to people and tell them you can do no wrong, if you protest and run towards police and get stabbed and killed, you're the hero. It's the police's fault. It's Israel's fault. I'm not saying Israel doesn't make mistakes. I know that they do. I know that they have an agenda. I'm not a shill for Israel. I'm not Jewish. I've never been to Israel. I have no personal stake in this situation, to be honest. I'm just telling you the truth. And this is something that progressives and liberals, for the most part, they'll never tell you, because in their weirdo heads, the police are always wrong. And like I said, I've been a victim of bad policing and discriminatory policing, or, you know, pinpoint policing. I'm not saying police are perfect. I'm not saying Israel's perfect. But if you have no common sense, if you have no accountability, you're never going to be right, you're never going to be accurate, and you're never going to help people. And this is the narrative of the left now. I just don't know any other way to put it. They're protesters. I mean, protesters can throw urine and feces and Molotov cocktails and missiles, and protesters can run towards the border and, you know, try to break in, and then when something happens, it's like, oh my goodness, how dare them touch the peaceful protesters? I mean, this is the type of stuff that they do, and it's just so annoying. And I know this because people always say, oh, well, I'm not being biased. I'm reading the liberal newspapers. They admit it. Democracy Now! Admits they're the most left-wing, you know, progressive, ultra-left-wing news network out there. They've admitted that the protesters weren't just protesters. The New York Times, you know, one of the most left-wing, liberal, Democrat, like, they're basically just a PR team for the Democrats. They've admitted that. I have them right here. They're saying literally in the article. Hold on, I'm about to read it real quick. All right, well, I can't find the exact part, but in the article they say dozens of people ran towards the border. So even in the most liberal, left-wing, anti-Israel newspapers, this is how I get my truth. People say, how do you... Because they admit it themselves every single time. The headline will be, oh my God, Trump said this. And then you get 4 paragraphs down and it'll say, oh, well... it's an anonymous source of a friend of a friend of a friend said that he might have said that like 5 years ago, and then no one even cares about the truth. So it's like I'm not saying I know everything that's going on, but when even the most left-wing and anti-Israel newspapers are admitting that these people aren't protesters, and it's a bigger issue to me than just Palestine and just Israel. And this is why I keep bringing it up and making it broader. If you have no self-accountability and you have no self-responsibility, please, liberals and progressives and the Democracy Nows and all of these people and Sean Kings, please listen to me. If you have no self-accountability, if you have no self-responsibility, if you have no common sense, you are not an activist, you are not a hero, you are not a good news analyst, you are not a good journalist, you are not a fair and righteous person, you are not a virtuous hero, you are a liar, you are a fraud, you are a complete charlatan, okay? And I get that these people are not bad people. Some of them I'm supporters and fans of. I like their work. I know that people do good things, and I'm not saying everything that they do is bad. but they don't have self-accountability. They don't want Gaza to have self-accountability. I want people in Palestine to have self-accountability so they don't die, and that so they can come to the table, figure out a peace talk, and keep their families alive. I want people in Gaza to live. I want people in Palestine to live. So if I was there, I'd say, hey guys, let's figure out a good activist strategy, but let's figure out a good strategy that has something to do with not throwing Molotov cocktails and not throwing flaming tires and throwing rocks and, running towards the border. That's what I would say to my people in Palestine. I'd say, hey guys, we're going to figure this out. We're going to do this in a smart way, because this is also what I've noticed as well. I've been to protests. I've taken part in protests, and a lot of people at protests, here's something I noticed just being at them here, and these were peaceful protests. I've noticed, just to be honest, I'm not like #1 fan of cops, but the police were being very respectful, and it was the protesters who were being very dumb. So I took it upon myself to enforce them myself. So the police didn't have to. I said, come on. They said to get out of the street, and someone's standing in the middle of the street. It's like all they asked you to do is stand on the sidewalk. You being in the street is not going to change. It was for a water protest to, keep clean water and save the water. You standing in the middle of the street about to get hit by a car stopping traffic, it's not going to change anything. If you're Palestinian and you're running towards the border or you're throwing rocks, do you think the whole Israeli regime is going to be knocked down because you threw a rock over a wall? I mean, get a grip. Do you think you're going to take down, the country of Israel because 50 people ran towards the border and get shot by Israeli police? There's nothing virtuous about this, and it doesn't matter. And I noticed that protests, a lot of people that go there, they just go there to feel good about themselves. They just go there to pat themselves on the back and be like, oh, I'm a hero. But what did you really do? I went to a bunch of protests for the water, but at a certain point I stopped going because I was like, you know what? If I really care about this, I need to figure out a solution to the problem, because standing in the street isn't going to change it. 100 people marching isn't going to change it. So you need to have some sort of strategy to actually change the situation. And what's happening in Israel and Palestine right now, above the whole backstory, is you have people that have no self-accountability. You have people that have an agenda, an anti-agenda, and then you have the media, the progressive and the liberal media, that will just 100% always pander towards that victim. No matter what they do, you could throw rocks, you could throw stones, you could throw missiles, you could throw, and I'm not saying everything's fair. I'm not saying the world's perfect. I'm not saying United States and Saudi Arabia and Israel shouldn't be held accountable. This isn't what I'm saying, but have some ounce of self-accountability, have some ounce of integrity to just be like, if I really want to solve the problem, maybe me breaking the law and trying to crash through the border is not going to do that. So this is what I want to say about the situation. I'm not trying to get too into it. I don't have that much stake into it. I don't know about the thousands years history. I know what the Bible says. I know what other religious texts say. I know what history says. I know what other people say. I listen to both sides. But one thing that I wanted to talk about now, because it seems to be a recurring topic, not just in conservative and Jewish media, but also in liberal and progressive, anti-Israel type media, or just whatever you want to say, anti-Zionist or anti-globalist, whatever, is that the protesters, they use the word protesters all the time, and they even admit themselves that they're not just protesters. Just because you have an idea, and just because you might be the person that has less power in the situation, does not mean that you could do whatever you want and it's a smart idea. You can do it, but every action has a consequence. I mean, that's just the way the world is. Like, if you run at a police officer with a knife, you're gonna get shot. I know Twitter tells you you're a hero, progressives will tell you you're a hero, and alt-left, liberals will tell you you're such a hero, but in reality, you reaped what you sowed. You pretty much killed yourself because you ran at a police. If, during the embassy day, when they tell you, if you come near the border, it's not a big secret. I mean, Israel's been protecting the border for years now. If you run towards the border and throw rocks or throw any sort of Molotov, or throw anything at militarized police with snipers and stuff, you're probably going to get shot at. And when you do, you can't act like, oh my goodness, I had no idea they were going to do that. They've been doing it for 10 years. But I don't want people to die. See, this is the difference between me and I feel like progressives and liberals, that they want people to die. Like, I don't see any other way around it, because they're like, keep making those mistakes, you know, don't have a multifaceted approach. It's never your fault. It's always Israel's fault. It's always America's fault. It's always the police's fault. It's always men's fault. Like, they always pick somebody and tell you, have no self-accountability, have no self-responsibility, and also have no full-scale approach. Like, going to a rally with ultra alt-right people and starting violence with them, or throwing, you know, poop feces things at them, like, that's not a solution. Yeah, like, maybe you'll get a nice little article in the Washington Post, and Vox and Vice will do a whole documentary on you and be like, wow, what a hero, they just threw poop at right-wing activists. It's like, it's just not a solution. Like, it might make you feel good for a second, but it's not. I just don't see how any of that really helps. And I'm not picking sides. I want to see a peace talk. I want to see love. I want to see all of these things, but there's a weird skewed perception in the media, and a lot of people are saying, which I honestly agree with, because I actually have a scope of the rest of the world, is that a lot of countries would be even, you know, harsher. And I mean, you look at places like Saudi Arabia and other, you know, Arab nations, when there was a refugee crisis, none of them wanted to take the refugees in. So where did all the refugees go? They went to UK, they went to Germany, they went to Sweden, and they went to countries like that. Why? Because Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries didn't want them. It's not just an Israeli thing, and I don't care. I'm just saying, like, there's this weird, like, projection that America and Israel are so bad and racist, and everywhere in the world is just so much better, and we're the bad. It's just not true. When the United States and North Korea were beefing, and it seemed like something might happen in North Korea, did China open its borders and say, hey, North Korea, if anything bad happens here, you guys can seek shelter here? No, they lined their border, and Russia, with military to shoot and kill anybody that tried to come near. So it's very standard to protect your borders. But we've been so indoctrinated in this phony liberalism, we've been so indoctrinated in this phony progressivism, that we think that America and Israel are the only ones with borders and border security, and that, oh my God, it's so mean, just open everything up and let everyone in. And I have no problem with anybody. I don't care about any of this, but it's not like a thing that just Israel does. China does it. Saudi Arabia does it. Most countries do it. Syria didn't secure their borders, and they paid the price, unfortunately, via, you know, terrorist organizations that probably the U.S. and Israel might have been funding, and, you know, just a lot of mess over there, and, you know, Libya and other places. So it's just basic common sense to, like, secure your borders and, you know, not let any BS there. So it's not just a thing there. And, you know, I understand Israel's a more complex situation. One, because that land is very holy and sacred to people, so there's a whole religious aspect to it. It's not just a border thing. It's like a whole religious ideology going on between multiple religions. So I understand that. That's why I stay out of it. It's like, you guys can fight over that and figure it out. It's not my place. I'm not the president. I'm not Nikki Haley. I'm not Netanyahu. That's not my job. But also, you know, there's that going on. So it is a multi-layered, multifaceted thing to think about. But in any way, shape, or form, all I wanted to say was two things I think are pretty accurate, but seems to be getting lost in the sauce, especially among, you know, progressives and liberals, is they're not protesters. Protesters are not perfect. Protesters need to have common sense if they don't want to die, especially in a place like Israel, because it's easy to talk about over here, but if you go to Israel or you go to Syria, it's very real, okay? You know, I have friends that live 15 minutes from terrorists and stuff. That's just, unfortunately, there is that element to the Middle East. And I mean, Israel, I don't know about everything about it, but it's like they're Jewish, they're a Jewish state surrounded by a bunch of non-Jewish people, and a lot of people, you know, including Palestine and Iran and probably Turkey and other places, they don't even want them to exist. So it's easier said than done to just be like, oh my God, like, just don't do anything. Because that, I mean, it's a self, you know, it would not end up well. So, you know, I don't want to weigh in on it too much. Someone said Abby Martin will tell you everything you need to know. That's not true. Abby Martin will tell you the progressive ideology. Abby Martin will tell you that everybody in Palestine is innocent. Abby Martin will tell you that they're just protesters and they're innocent and, you know, they should storm the border, and if they get shot by police, that it's not good. Abby Martin won't tell you everything you need to know. She's progressive. She's very honest about a lot of things, but she revels in the victim mentality. She hates America. She hates Israel. She hates pretty much Western civilization, and she has this twisted ideology that if America and Israel and Europe didn't exist, that the world would just be a shiny supernova of just rainbows and lollipops. That's what Abby Martin will tell you. So she's not the all-being beacon of truth. She's extremely progressive. She's extremely negative and pessimistic, and she's extremely anti-America and anti-Israel. And I don't say that in a way of like, oh, you can't criticize America and Israel, but that's just the progressive ideology. They always pander to the victims. They always play the victim mentality card, and they have zero self-accountability and zero self-responsibility. I've read them all. I read all the things. They're not protesters. You know, they definitely are not just allowed to do whatever they want and, you know, get away with it. And oh my goodness, who would have known that? People, I mean, everyone knows that. There's a certain area. I mean, if you live in Palestine, Abby Martin won't tell you this, okay? Progressives won't tell you this. I think they want you to die. They want to act like they're the virtuous gods of truth, true information, and they want people to get killed. But don't go near the border. I don't know. Like, if that's what they're doing in Israel, don't go there. I mean, it's just basic common sense. If they're shooting and killing people right near the border, don't go near the border. You're not going to break through the entire Jewish army with 50 people and a bunch of kids. If you bring kids along, that's child abuse. I mean, that's not the Israel army's fault. I'm not saying that they should kill kids and stuff, but isn't that child abuse if you take your little kids and you take your family and you run towards the border with militarized police? I mean, it's complete lunacy. It makes absolutely no sense. It's not going to overthrow Israel. It's not going to have any sort of effect. What it does is it plays right into the hand of progressive and liberal medias. And I'm sure that organizations in Palestine know this, just like anyone knows this. I mean, it's easy to dupe liberals and progressives because they don't care about the truth. They don't care about the story. They don't care about multi-layered, faceted and arguments. They have an agenda. So you can die, you can get shot, you can do this to a police, you can do that to a border, and progressives and liberals will always back you up. So they can do it for a narrative. And if they're that easy to manipulate, if you can literally just use kids and families as a shield for, you know, for a narrative in the media, they'll do it all the time. And that's literally what they do. I mean, whether it's a school or the kids, or what about the women, or what about these people? They're minorities, and that's literally their game. They do that every single day in America, in Palestine, all over the world, is they use the victim mentality. They take people that are, you know, vulnerable, and they use it for a narrative, and then they have the inability to even fathom outside of that realm. And that's how I know they're lying, because even in their articles where they're saying that it's Israel's fault, and they're saying that Palestine didn't do any wrong, they even admit in their own articles that they're doing stuff. If you're throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails and running with dozens of people towards a border with militarized police, you're not a protester. I don't care if Abby Martin says it, she's lying. I don't care if Bernie Sanders says it, he's lying. I don't care if the New York Times says it, and Washington Post says it, and Ro Khanna says it, and Keith Ellison says it. They're all lying. Protesters don't run towards borders. Protesters don't throw things on fire and throw stones over walls. That's not a protester. That's not a protest. That's the type of protest that overturns Ukraine. That's the type of protest that creates a 7-year war in Syria, a 7-year civil war. There's a difference between a little privileged American protest where you march in the streets for an hour, nothing happens, and you go home, throw all your signs in the street and feel real good about yourself. Hundreds of thousands, it's like a little arts and crafts project because we're so privileged in America. Oh, I made a big difference. Me and 10,000 friends just made a little arts and crafts project on a thing, and we went and we marched and we threw it in the streets, and now that's not how protests work in Israel and Palestine. That's not how protests work in Syria. They use them to overturn the person. That's how they started it in Syria. Oh, it's a protest. Oh, it's just a protest. It's just a protest. It's just a protest. Next thing you know, oh, it's a militarized protest. It's just a protest. Next thing you know, there's a civil war, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra are all over, and the borders aren't secure. That's literally how the Syrian war started. Protest. How did Ukraine, how did the Ukraine situation get overturned? Oh, it's just a protest. I mean, they had tiki torches. They looked like Charlottesville. They're out there. Next thing you know, oh, what do you know? New president. And same thing with Israel Palestine. It's not a protest if it goes further. If you're marching and you're throwing your signs all over the street, yeah, it's a protest. But if you're throwing stones, if you're throwing Molotov cocktails, if you're running dozens of people with your family towards the border, it's not only not a protest, it's child abuse, and it's a militarized riot of some sorts. And it's not out of the realm that people do this. I mean, look at what goes on in the Middle East. People are so privileged here that they just think it's just rainbows and sunshine because Abby Martin told me so, and she's so great because Abby Martin hates America and hates Israel, and her hate for her own privilege is just so honest and so accurate because she always, it's the victim's mentality. And why don't we just give let's give Israel to Palestine. I have an idea. Here's the progressive solution for Abby Martin and the progressives all over the world. Let's give Israel to Palestine. Let's give Europe to Arab. Let's just make all of Europe Arab. Let's destroy the patriarchy in America and just give it up to, let's give it to socialists. We'll have free healthcare and free education. We'll get rid of capitalism. We'll just have full-on socialism. Israel will be Palestine's, and Europe will be, a nation under one God, and the world will just be rainbows and butterflies. Yes, Bernie Sanders and Abby Martin, thank you so much for your brilliant activism. You're so smart. You're so right. Socialism and just complete destruction of Western civilization it's going to make everything so great because, without Israel, Palestine would just be blossoming with flowers and people would just be succeeding. And, that's totally what's been happening for thousands of years in the Middle East. It's not like they've been fighting over and over and over and over again. It's not like almost every major invention has come from Western civilization and democracy and freedom and common sense and liberty. It's not like every single thing that we utilize today and all of the freedoms and, amazing things that technology, it's not like it's all come from Western civilization. You're totally right, Bernie Sanders. You're totally right, Abby Martin. Please take all my money, take all my taxes, socialize the healthcare, put it all in the hands of government. Let's do what they did in Germany. It's a brilliant idea. And then we'll give everything to Palestine. We'll give everything to Turkey and Iran, and everything will just work out smoothly. Forget what I just said. I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, don't have self-accountability. Don't have self-responsibility. You're right. Roger said, you're a Zionist mouthpiece. You're right. Self-accountability, self-responsibility, and common sense is a Zionist approach. You're totally right. I've never been to Israel. I'm not Jewish. I have no stakes in the game, but I apologize for telling people to have common sense. You might as well just run into a spiked wall and then ask everybody why it happened. I don't know. Maybe that's what people want. So much love. God bless you guys. Like always, I'm just being honest. I want to see some self-accountability. I want to see some self-responsibility. I find that the media coverage is very, very skewed on this, but it's nothing normal. And I'm just trying to have a conversation. I know maybe a few people were upset. Most people probably agree, but I don't, it's just so bizarre to me that what I'm saying is controversial. I'm not even telling you how I feel about Israel and Palestine because I don't even really know. I don't know the history of it. I wasn't alive, and I don't live there, and I don't witness it every day. So I'm not even being super pro-Israel. That's not even what I'm saying. So if you can't even handle what I'm saying, it just shows how far the media has skewed people, where just like a basic centrist approach, basic common sense, is considered revolutionary. I'm not even saying I'm pro-Israel. I'm saying I don't want people in Palestine to die, so I'm telling them to have a little bit of common sense and a little bit of, and I'm telling progressive and liberal media, hey, let's make a new word for people who do things that's not just a basic peaceful protest that's getting them killed. That's what I'm saying. I'm not even saying I'm super pro-Israel. I've called out Israel in the United States more than most media. And this is the thanks that I get from people for telling people not to kill themselves. Oh, I'm so sorry for not telling lesbians to just run into police officers with knife That's what you get from progressives, and that's what you get from fake liberals like Twitter. They tell you to run at police officers with knives in your hands, and then they act like you're a big activist. Does that make me a Zionist? Because I don't want you to kill yourself and just, oh my God, why did that happen? Because you're a moron, because you have no common sense, because you have no self-accountability, and that's rampant all over the place. So I don't even really care what you think about Israel or Palestine. Like always, I'm saying have common sense, have self-accountability, have self-responsibility if you don't want to get murdered on the Gaza Strip. I don't know. I'm sorry for telling you that. Maybe you want to get murdered and then you want to be written up in the New York Times and say, oh, Anomaly's a Zionist because he told me not to kill myself and my family. I mean, that's the message here, folks. I don't care what you think about Israel. I don't care what you think about Palestine. Just don't die. Don't kill yourself trying to be a fake revolutionary, and don't listen to phony activists. I'm sorry that I'm calling out the phony activists who, oh, they turned on a cop and got slapped. Oh my God, why did the cop do? Well, because they turned around. I'm not a huge cop fan, but that happens. I mean, if I run at a cop with a knife, they're probably going to shoot me, and it would probably be my fault. That's why I would never do that. But you don't find that on the left. You don't find that on the liberal and progressive side because they don't have that mechanism. They hate America. They hate Israel. They hate Western civilization. They hate themselves. They hate their blessings. They hate their freedoms. They're making, six-figure salaries and touring the country, saying what they want, living the life of freedom, being able to say what you want in a democracy, being able to challenge the authority. They're challenging Israel. They're challenging America. Yeah, that's great. But they're never grateful about it. They're just low-energy crabs who will always pander to the victim, who will never tell the multifaceted approach. And that's what they do. I don't know. I mean, if you want someone to lie, there's multiple people lying about it. But I'm just telling you the cracks that I saw through the news. God bless you. Thank you guys so much for listening. God bless your family. God bless the world. God bless Palestine. And God bless Israel. I hope, I hope everybody figures it out. And I know it's a multifaceted approach. I'm just saying, it's a very, tell me what you think about the situation. If you think that Israel deserves the land, if you think that Palestine deserves the land, that's fine. I'm not telling you what to think on that. I'm just saying, in the meantime, I'm not talking about the history. I've said this 15,000 times, so I'm just saying it real quick before I leave, because every time I live stream now, I can't even say anything. I can say, I like a banana, and someone will say, oh, well, why'd you stand up for the globalists in Iran? And it's like, I didn't say that. I said I liked a banana. So don't twist what I'm saying. I'm not telling you about the history of Israel and Palestine. I'm not telling you about the reality of there. I'm not telling you about the settlements and who owns the land and who deserves to be here and who deserves that. I'm just telling you about the last 24 hours. I'm telling you about what the media themselves said in their own articles and how you're literally not a protester and you're not a very smart person if you do that. But, if you want to be dumb and you want to make mistakes, you want to kill yourself, I guess that's, your right to run at militarized police or run at police officers. I mean, if that's, I guess, I apologize for spreading some basic common sense and some basic self-accountability. I forgot how taboo that was. We live in a society where people have no self-awareness, no self-accountability, and no self-responsibility. So God forbid somebody come in and be nice and be polite and just be as fair as possible and tell you, hey, maybe you should have like an ounce of common sense and an ounce of self-accountability. It's the craziest thing in the world. So I'm out. Maybe I won't live stream that much anymore because clearly it's such a controversial act. I might as well just enjoy myself. Have a good day, guys. Appreciate you guys.